In this video, we're going to cover the 5 most common reasons that people regret moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Over the past 30 years, Chattanooga really has transformed from being this industrial and gritty city to a modern city with beautiful amenities and great character. This city has lured thousands of newcomers with promises of ultra-fast internet, scenic beauty, and lower cost of living. But in this video, we're going to uncover 5 hidden trade-offs that newcomers often experience. Without further ado, let's jump into the video. So the first thing that makes many people moving to this area regret actually moving here is that costs have risen, but wages haven't really kept up. And so as a result, you have this two-tiered economy. The narrative around Chattanooga tends to be that it's this affordable place to live with great scenery, fast internet, great food, great access, but this isn't necessarily true for everybody. In reality, for people moving to the area that are able to work from home or have large savings from living in other places where income can be higher, Chattanooga is quite affordable. It really is a very affordable place compared to the national average. But for local people that have been here for years and years and years, it can be quite difficult to get by with the way that costs have increased over the past several years. And so there really is this widening gap between newcomers with outside income and Chattanooga locals or people that are working on a local salary. So what has caused the cost of living to go up so much here while the wages remained relatively stagnant? Well, a lot of this comes back to the housing market. Over the past 8 years, house prices in the Chattanooga area have nearly doubled. This is partially because during COVID, a lot of people were moving to Tennessee, and so there was a number of homes that were getting multiple offers, and as demand outpaced supply, the price of housing really started to increase. Another thing that's driving the cost of housing here is that institutional investors are buying up housing stock. Then the average person has a hard time competing with that. This has led to higher rent in the area, higher housing prices, and an overall higher cost of living in the Chattanooga area. As I mentioned earlier, the wages locally have been stagnant for a number of years, or they've been growing a bit, but they haven't really kept pace with the growth in cost of living. When researching this video, I was going through a number of posts on Reddit, and people are describing the wages in Chattanooga as being awful, a joke, and they're describing this overall as being a low wage epidemic. Here are a couple examples that I found on various user forums on the internet. The first one was somebody talking about trying to move to the Chattanooga area and having a master's in healthcare management and only finding job offers for between $60,000 and $70,000 a year, which really, if you're trying to buy a home now, makes it quite difficult to buy a home on a salary like that. Another person with years of experience in IT mentioned they were having difficulty finding a job and found a number of IT jobs that were actually 60% below in pay scale what similar jobs were paying in other locations. If you're working in unskilled labor or in manufacturing, you can expect base pays to start between $15 and $19 an hour, which is quite low for the cost of living in the area now. A lot of apartments in the Chattanooga area are going to start around $1,500 a month now. You can find things cheaper than that, but a lot of things are starting there. So if you're making between $15 and $19 an hour, that eats up a significant portion of your monthly earnings. So for a lot of people moving to the Chattanooga area, this has actually been a major source of regret for them, because if you move to Chattanooga with a remote job or a job where you can work from home, and then you lose that job or your company has to cut back, and then you're forced to look at local employers, you could have a very difficult time keeping up with the same standards that you had before you lost your job. And so there are a number of people that have moved to Chattanooga with great work from home jobs, and then their job had a callback to the office, or there was something that caused them to start looking for other employment opportunities in the Chattanooga area, and they were just disappointed with the competitiveness of the job market here. There are some great opportunities and some great jobs in the Chattanooga area, but the pay scales tend to be quite a bit below what other larger cities are offering and paying their employees. And so if you are planning to relocate to the Chattanooga area and you're importing a salary, or you have a great job where you can work remotely and you would like to live somewhere with lower cost of living like Chattanooga, that's great. That's totally a possibility. And you're probably going to have a fantastic lifestyle here, but try to be sure that you're not going to lose that work from home job, because that could put you in a tough position, especially if you have a hard time finding a replacement job in the Chattanooga area at a comparable salary. Okay, let's move to the next reason that's causing people to regret their move to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is growing pains or infrastructural overload. So it's no secret that the Chattanooga area has grown a lot over the past 30 years. There have been tons of people relocating to the area. Chattanooga really is a small city overall, but at times it does have big city traffic, especially at the notorious I-75 and I-24 interchange. Right there, you're going to experience a lot of traffic. There is almost always traffic in that area. And that's because for years now, they've been working to widen and redevelop this area. Fortunately, it looks like we are nearing completion, at least on the portion of that road where traffic has been bad for a long time now. So hopefully that alleviates some of the traffic and some of the congestion pains that we're having in this area. A few other infrastructural things that people moving to the area tend to complain about is that there is a lack of thoughtfulness in the design of some of the neighborhoods. For instance, there are not a lot of sidewalks in many of the suburbs of Chattanooga. Now, there are some that are quite walkable and have great access, but a number of them do not have good sidewalks. And so to safely get even the shortest of distances, you're probably going to want to hop in your car and drive. Another thing I saw quite a few complaints about is that a lot of roads don't have very wide shoulders, and some of them just abruptly go into ditches. So if narrow, winding roads with no shoulder are something that is difficult for you, then parts of Chattanooga, certain suburbs, might not be a good option for you. And then the other infrastructural thing that I saw a number of people complaining about is that there is not really public transit. So there is the Carta bus system, but that really will only get you around the downtown area and perhaps between East Brainerd and downtown, but it's not a very robust system, and you're going to spend a lot of time waiting if that's your primary means of transportation. Now, there is Lyft and Uber and some other options for rideshare, but for the most part, Chattanooga is a car-dependent city. The third thing I see a lot of people talking about when they say that they regret moving to Chattanooga is that in Chattanooga, people are really polite, but they're a bit cliquey. I would say this really depends on which suburb or area you're in Chattanooga, and it partially comes back to you if you relocate to the area. So I grew up in the greater Chattanooga area, moved away, and then came back after about 13 years of not living here. I would say that it's somewhat difficult to make deep connections and deep relationships with people, but it all comes down to what kind of communities you inject yourself into and how much you really want to put yourself out there and build those connections. But I saw a number of people on Reddit and other forums saying that it's very difficult to break into the Chattanooga social scene. I'd say that overall that's probably true. It just takes effort and it takes time. Also, if you've been watching a lot of YouTube videos on the Chattanooga area as a whole, you've probably seen a few comments from local people saying something about, "Stop moving here, Chattanooga is full." There is an attitude among some locals that they don't want their area to change. They like the conservative nature of Chattanooga and the greater Chattanooga area as a whole, and they want to maintain that. And so they don't want people coming in and ruining it for them. But I really do think that as a whole, Chattanooga is quite welcoming and open to people. You just have to find your right group. Something that's interesting is there are a lot of churches and church communities in the Chattanooga area, and that is a very easy way to plug into the local culture. I did see some people mentioning though that even though they are involved in their church, they were having a difficult time building relationships and connections despite being so involved with their church. If you're thinking about moving to the area and you're religious, church could be a good way to make connections. If you're into a specific sport or hobby, then I would start to look for groups in that area. So if you're into rock climbing, join a rock climbing gym, jujitsu, join a jujitsu gym, or just any gym in general. I think you can make good friends doing that. Look for run clubs or art groups or other things like that. But it's going to take some work to inject yourself into this community. It's not really set up and it's not as easy to make connections as some other bigger urban metros. And so just keep that in mind. If you're thinking about moving here, it is one of the reasons that people regret moving to the area. Hey, really quick, I am a licensed real estate agent in both Tennessee and Georgia. So if you're thinking about moving to the area and if you found this video helpful so far, feel free to reach out. My phone number is 423-358-5656. You can call or text anytime or scan the QR code here on screen to book a virtual meeting with me. All right, let's get back to the video. Okay, the fourth reason that people regret moving to Chattanooga is that there are some pretty significant environmental realities. And so what do I mean by that? Well, number one, there is what's described as a pollen vortex in Chattanooga. And so what does this mean? Well, the way that the geography of Chattanooga is shaped, there are these mountains and then there's a valley. And so what tends to happen is that pollen from all the beautiful flowering plants and trees that we have in the area will get kind of sucked into the valley, and then it just sort of swirls around in the valley. And it's pretty difficult for that pollen to escape the valley. And so a number of people that move to the area that are sensitive to pollen say that their allergies are the worst that they've ever had while living in Chattanooga. And then I also saw a number of people saying that after they moved to Chattanooga, they developed allergies. So they didn't really have allergies before. Maybe they moved from an area without a lot of pollen, but then once they moved to Chattanooga, they started getting allergies. It's pretty real. The pollen was bad in the spring. I don't have a garage at my current house. And so every day when I go outside, there would be like a thin yellow dusting of pollen on my car. And it's a problem. It's just a pain to deal with. And you can wash your car every day, but it's not gonna get rid of the pollen if you don't have a garage. So that was a pain. Fortunately, I don't really suffer from allergies so much, but I have a number of people that I'm close with that will take allergy medications in those times of year where allergies are especially bad. Another problem that a lot of people report when moving here is that they'll come and visit Chattanooga at one of the better times of year to visit, so spring or fall, or just at the beginning of winter or the end of winter, and they really see this kind of ideal version of Chattanooga, and they don't realize how oppressive the heat and humidity can be. Now, if you're moving from somewhere like Texas or Florida, you're probably gonna laugh at this, but to people from areas where it's not as hot and not as humid, Chattanooga summers can be really, really oppressive. Another thing that some people don't realize about moving to Chattanooga is that in the winter, things can be quite gloomy and rainy and a little bit depressing. So we have a lot of deciduous trees here, which means that they lose their leaves in the fall and then they regrow them in the spring. So most of our foliage and greenery in the Chattanooga area is deciduous, meaning that it loses its leaves in the fall and then in the spring, the leaves come back out. So this is partially what contributes to that pollen, but in the winter, most of the greenery is not there. And so if you go out and about, everything's just kind of brown and really like twiggy. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can just see all the like twigs and limbs on the trees, and they're not like these big full trees like we have in the spring and the summer and the fall. And so that's something to be aware of. Everything's just brown. It's a little bit depressing. It doesn't look as good as it does in the spring, the summer, and the fall. And so that's something to be aware of with the winters. Another environmental thing that not many people are aware of, especially in the downtown Chattanooga area when it gets dry, there are some really unsavory scents that are in the downtown Chattanooga area. So there is a poultry plant, Cook Foods, which is in the downtown Chattanooga area. And if it's a hot day and they're working in the plant, it smells terrible around Cook Foods. So I would avoid that if you can. And then also along the riverfront, there's this aging sewage treatment facility a little bit further down the riverfront. And it seems to be that when it's really dry and hot outside, there is a pretty strong odor of sewage in parts of downtown Chattanooga. So that's something to note and something to look out for if you're moving to the area, and something that I personally would not really appreciate if I bought a home down there and then, every day you go outside and it smells like sewage. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking in the downtown area for housing, is just be aware of what's in the general environment. This brings us to the final reason that I saw that people regret moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that is that in Chattanooga, we have a number of big city problems with very few big city perks. So what does that mean? You've got rising costs, you've got more and more congestion from all the traffic coming to the area, but you don't have many of the cultural payoffs that you get with a larger city. So in cities like Atlanta and Nashville, you're gonna have big artists come through town and do shows and play at arenas. In Chattanooga, you don't really get that. We do have some stars that come through town, but it's not nearly as many as you get in Atlanta and Nashville. If you're into nightlife, there really isn't much of that in the Chattanooga area. In fact, Chattanooga tends to kind of close down a little bit early. There's not many restaurants that are open into the early morning hours. For the most part, things closed down at a pretty tame time. I saw somebody write on Reddit that we've got big city traffic with a zoo the size of somebody's backyard. That's not true. If you have a backyard the size of the Chattanooga Zoo, invite me over. That would be an impressive backyard, especially if you've got all the animals to go with it. But we do have some significant traffic. When people complain about the traffic and congestion in Chattanooga, they're usually comparing it to how Chattanooga used to be, not to other big cities. So if you're from a city like Atlanta, Knoxville on game days, then the traffic in Chattanooga is gonna seem like a joke. So that's gonna be it for this video. Those are 5 reasons that people regret moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee. If you're thinking about making the move to the Chattanooga area and you want more info on what it's like to live here, check out some of these videos. YouTube thinks you might like them. I make a lot of content on what it's like to live in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area. So go ahead and check some of that out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.